ಪ್ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೆ. ಎಷ್ಟು ಖುಷಿಯಾಗಿದ್ವಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾ ನಾವು.
Joined by another National Film Award winner and, of course, the director of Sapta Saagaradaache Ello Side B. That is, of course, Hemanth M Rao. Hemanth, it's so wonderful to have you on filmeshilmy.com. We had such a wonderful chat with Rakshit just a few days ago, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with you now as well.
No, pleasure. The pleasure is mine. It's always nice to, talk to people who have seen the film, more importantly. So and I saw your chat with Rakshit and I quite enjoyed it. So I'm quite looking forward.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much for watching that. And I mean, congratulations on the film. It was quite funny because I watched Side B first and then I revisited Side A. And it was quite interesting. It was very intriguing because I feel like generally, I'm going to start off with the technical aspects because that's what really jumps out at me. Initially in the Side A film, it's a lot more gentle. The color schemes, the lighting is a lot more gentle. It's a lot brighter. You use the color blue quite a lot to sort of symbolize a sense of tranquility, sense of innocence. But then inside B, however, there's a lot more darker, ominous colors where you have the reds, the yellows, the black as well. Tell me again, when you were deciding the color grading and the sort of significance behind the lighting, what factors came into play?
I'm very, see, I'm the kind of a filmmaker who believes that the treatment of the scene is what really differentiates it, makes it interesting, makes it unique, right? And one of the fundamental pillars of the set treatment is the mood that you create with the lighting and the contrast that you create and the kind of ambience you'd sort of allow the audience to sort of get into. That is where I think cinema becomes, I mean, a scene becomes, more than what is being said between two characters. So when I was very particular about the treatment of the film from the very beginning. It's something that I quite take a lot of time sort of figuring out for myself. And once I have a sense of what it should be, then I discuss with my cinematographer Advaita Gurumurthy, and we work together a lot in terms of getting those elements like the blues and the reds, and how can we bring in those colors, bring in those, how do we treat the mood of the scene. Like that is something that that was very central to our conversation. And we decided on a very distinctive look for both films because they're vastly different in terms of emotional context. So we wanted a slightly, like you rightly pointed out, we wanted a very serene, slightly tranquil sort of a setup inside A, and have a very grungy look inside B. And we in fact changed the lens as well to achieve that look. So the thinking behind it was to sort of, these are all very subconscious elements, but I feel when you're watching a film, these are things that sort of, unknowingly take control of your brain. Like that's what I have noticed happen to me when I watch films. So I wanted to, take a leaf from the masters in terms of how they have done it in the past and see if we can do something similar.
Sure. And it was interesting because I told Rakshit also this sort of bond that uh, Manu has with Surabhi. It kind of reminded me of Dev and Chandramukhi in Dev D. There was that sense of earthly, sort of a broken-hearted man going to a woman who, again, was also kind of is also in many ways broken-hearted herself, and they found solace in each other. There was a lot of noir. There was a very huge noir feel I felt to Side B, which I don't know. I'm sure that's something that you might have consciously thought about. I'm not sure, but again, the very Anurag Kashyap type of sort of cinema that we are familiar with, it felt very much from that sort of class or from that like sort of legacy of filmmaking. Who would you say really inspired you for this whole noir feel?
No, I've grown up watching a lot of noir. Like my previous film, Kapiludari, had very strong noir elements. So I'm a proper like I've grown up watching black and white actual film noir. I'm deeply inspired by the works of Orson Welles and Alfred Hitchcock and all of Humphrey Bogart, and I've seen their films and grown up like watching a lot of their films. So the noir influences primarily come from there for me, at least in terms of they're all black and white films, but the tonality in terms of the mood in which the characters speak, the way they behave, the way the scenes are lit, it comes primarily from that. Of course, I've followed Anurag Kashyap's work a lot, obviously, but for me, the influence as such is from old school Hollywood.
Hmm. And I think the beauty as well is the fact that you're working with Rakshit, I think for the third or fourth time, or if not, as
Yeah.
has
What film?
it's the fourth film, right? And I think the beauty about, working with familiar people is the fact that you've seen their growth and their journey. Um, Obviously the Rakshit that I'm sure that you began working with first time round, I'm sure is a different person now. I mean, experiences, maturity, all of those aspects must have really come into play. What would you say has been the greatest growth about him as an artist, especially when it comes to side B in particular, because it is a very broken-hearted man. And how important is it to also have, especially in Kannada cinema, to have a backing of, Paramva Studios as well, because obviously it's a huge company, right? And they turn out some really great content.
No, it's massive. I've said it. I've said this several times on record. Actually, that I have waited 12 years to make this film, and the only reason why this film has been possible is because the biggest missing piece is Rakshit, and his belief in a certain kind of cinema is absolutely fundamental for filmmakers like myself, because he's really created a platform for filmmakers to go and express themselves. He's easily one of the biggest enablers of talent in Canada, and the single greatest thing about him is his ability to stay naive and innocent despite his growth. And that's a very hard thing to do, because with every film, with every success, with stardom, especially with meteoric stardom, which in a very short period of time he's achieved a lot, and he's really grown to be a very big star in Canada and outside Karnataka. So for that to happen and still maintain and have the same kind of worldview and same kind of ethos is a very difficult thing. Uh, and for him to have done that successfully is a testament to his character and personality.
Oh, very beautifully said. And I always believe that, once an artist or whichever creative form it is, I think once they sort of feel like they've reached a sense of complacency, that's a step that really is quite detrimental to their craft as creatives. Because I feel like जब arrogance आती है, वो innocence lose हो जाता है, वो
Yeah,
vulnerability
yeah,
lose हो जाती है.
yeah.
And I think आपने बहुत सही पकड़ा इस बात को. But I want to talk, I mean, we'll talk about Rakshit just in a bit, but I want to talk a bit about you as a filmmaker, because I know from what I've read and heard that this script has been with you for a very, very long time, right? It's
Yeah.
been for a very long time. So I want to know, किसने आपका दिल तोड़ा है इतना जिसके लिए आपको एक पूरी फिल्म बनानी पड़ी? No, 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 jokes
No,
apart.
no.
I
No,
think
this as in see the thing about stories though, the characters and of course I have experienced heartbreak, I've experienced love and loss, and you experience these things. Anybody I'm 40 years old, so I've had my fair share of heartbreaks, and you know uh, uh, I've experienced the beauty of love and how fulfilling it is, and all of those things play a factor in terms of how I write the story. But once I start writing the story, it becomes the characters. It's just another story, right? I get very emotionally invested in the characters that I write, and I sort of project my feelings onto it in in various shapes and forms. So I end up becoming all characters in the story. Like there is I'm I feel what Surabhi feels, I feel what Priya feels, I feel what Manu feels, and what Deepak feels. So it helps for me. It helps me to write these characters. I can write these characters effectively only if I have sort of stop becoming myself. It's like I have to become those characters to write from their point of view. So it's a very interesting process where you sit in a room, a dark room, and just become somebody else and write their lives. So it's a very interesting insight. But the it was not it's the story was not inspired by heartbreak, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I would love to know. I mean, I know आपने सब कुछ experience किया है, but it felt very personal. I think that's one thing that I can take away from it. And again, we were talking about vulnerability. How did you, as a director, as a screenwriter, internalize all those emotions that you felt in your life and, splash it onto paper and then on camera?
No, that is something that I very clearly at the very beginning set out to do, in the sense that every single romantic drama or a film, a love story that I had seen in the recent past, the thing about I always felt that there was something missing in them, because there is a certain vulnerability that the characters feel when they are in love. You feel as strong and as powerful as you are when you are in love. You also feel very weak because you are allowing yourself at the mercy of another person, right? So that is the nature of love. It could be a partner, it could be a pet, it could be a family member, it could be anybody. So that vulnerability is what I wanted to sort of capture, in the film. So that was like the aim. So in fact, when we started doing workshops with the actors, the first thing that I told Rukmini and Rakshit was that the material demands that you need to give yourself and be vulnerable. How vulnerable you are with we are with each other, the film is going to reflect that. So we set out with that idea, and that is something that I sort of constantly demanded of myself and of everybody around me, to bring in a certain vulnerability in terms of how we work. Even with my cinematographer, there were calls that I wanted him to take, even though they might not be right calls, but I wanted him to feel like he's doing something, putting himself out there, right? Only if we do that can we create something, that is worth, it's like risky. If we feel that sense of nervousness when we're putting out something, so we like that is like the moral compass around which I went about doing the whole film. So it's good that it's all translated on screen and people are feeling that, that sense of vulnerability, that sense of personalness, because I wanted every technician. See, I've always believed that films cannot be done by one person. Like I have to allow my vision and allow other people to come. It's like a process of letting go of control for me, because I have a very clear idea of what the film is at the very beginning, but slowly I have to let go, and allow other people to make it their own. So that process is is uh, is very freeing and taxing at the same time. So I was, to be able to do that was kind of a very enriching journey for me.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. And I think also we feel a sense of entrapment throughout the film. Whether it's like, maybe a close-up shots or like, having sequences. For example, one of my favorite ones is when he's imagining sitting with Priya in the cafe, and they're having a sense of closure about life and where they're currently at. And then suddenly we see the boards of the interiors of the cafe moving out, and it's the beach again, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That was really beautiful, and in fact, this reminded me a lot of Joker. In Joker, because there was a sequence where Joaquin Phoenix imagines that lady in the same apartment, and he plays out in his mind how the love story would have panned out, but then obviously the reality is completely contrast. And I think that was very interesting. The fact that literally Manu keeps going back to Priya's husband's you know run-down cafe, which is obviously out of business. It shows again how he's trapped in that cycle. Even that pub that they go to have a drink, it's a very congested place. It's not very open. I mean, surely these things have not have been by design, right? I mean, tell me about the vision behind that as well and your decisions in using these.
It's all by design because all of it was set. We built the sets. We built we built those claustrophobic areas. I wanted a very, the thing about, again, going back to working with somebody like Rakshit, having a producer like Rakshit, I'm very privileged because usually what happens is when you say that you want to build a set, the producer would expect you to build something very big because you're spending a lot of money. You want something big. And here I am asking to build tight places, like small places. And, he got on board the idea very quickly. And the reason why I wanted to build everything in a certain, I kept telling my art director that we need to make it smaller. We need to make it smaller, even at the cost of making it difficult for us to have working space. Usually, when you build sets, the way it is built is that you have a lot of working space. So, what we in fact did in our sets is we built sets and then drilled holes in walls to shoot and place cameras.
Hmm.
So, because I wanted a very claustrophobic sort of environment in which Manu is, like, the whole idea was to take the audience into the mind of Manu, like experience his entrapment, experience his prison, so to speak. Like, even though he comes out of prison, there is a certain sense of always composing him behind bars, always composing him behind, there is a certain prison type of a outlook to how he is, every single time. I don't think there is a single frame, maybe barring one or two, there is a single frame where Manu is not behind bars or behind some sort of a grill or some sort of a cage. So the idea was to constantly keep the audience in that mind, because in the end, when he has that redemption, when he finds his redemption, I wanted that vast expanse to sort of hit the audience,
Hmm.
uh, in a big way. So that was done by design, and I have to thank my art director for doing such a wonderful job
Yeah, no,
building.
definitely. It felt almost like a psychological romance thriller type of a film. And I think that was really beautiful. There's so many different genres I feel that it really combines and styles it combines, where you almost forget the first part, essentially. The second part becomes so vast. And it's quite interesting you said about having a jail, because I think one of the characters also says when Manu is released that think of the world as a jail. And
Yeah,
that's quite literally what happens.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I think it's very fascinating also how you address capitalism here in this movie as well, which I thought was very telling. In fact, Manu, in many ways, again, not to compare it in any way, but it reminded me of Balram from The White Tiger, about what he goes through. I'm not sure if you've seen The White Tiger, but
I've not seen it. I know what it is, but I've not seen it.
it's very interesting how basically because the mistake of rich people, it's basically the lesser financially able society has to pay back for it. Again, why did you decide to make this at the backdrop of class division and all of that, and how and what do you think you've achieved by doing that? I mean, from the film.
I don't, to answer the second part of the question first, I don't know if I've achieved anything. I don't think I set out to, I don't think as a film, my power of influence is very limited, but at the same time is unlimited as well. It's difficult to quantify in terms of what exact impact I'm going to have on society or how people think. I can't take it too seriously. I can't take that power too seriously and believe that I'm somebody who can change the way people, how people think. I can only hold a mirror up to society in terms of what I observe and what I see. Right. So I don't know if there is any impact or change that I am able to bring about through the film. If I have, then great. But I don't, like I said, it's impossible to quantify. Coming back to the capitalism part and why that angle happened, I happened to be a prime witness in a hit and run case. Uh, like long back. That was the origin of the film. That is the origin of the story. Somebody died in front of me. There's a police inspector who died in front of me, in Bangalore, and a friend and I, we were returning from a movie, and we saw this happen right in front of us. And we, the court case sort of prolonged for a while, and I later found out like why. I was very curious about it because it had happened right in front of me. I found out that the driver uh, who drove for that household eventually ended up going into prison. So that's how, that was the origin of the story. That's how I saw it, and it's something that was very personal to me in the sense of what I saw, and hence it became like a good idea for me to write basis what I had witnessed. But the moment I started writing and discussing it with other people, everybody's like, "Hey, there's a film like this. There's a film," because it's a very common trope, right? The whole idea of a hit and run case and the driver taking a fall for it is a very common trope. And in Kannada itself, there's a very, very famous film that Mr. Shankar Nag and Anant Nag had done called Accident, which deals with the same thing, which came out like in the 80s. So there are many films which with this trope, but I still went ahead and made it because I felt a personal connection to the whole thing. And the way I wanted to examine it is not by sort of villainizing people or villainizing, any particular person. I just wanted to sort of not make any commentary in terms of the class divide, but just show it like it is. There is a certain indifference and the lack of empathy that I wanted to sort of portray, you know, which I feel is more heartless and more painful than what usually is shown in films, right? You end up villainizing these characters as these really evil people. They're not evil people. They're just people with privilege and access to power. And when you are in a position like that, it becomes an easier choice for you to take. You don't even realize that you are exploiting somebody else, right? And that is a sad tragedy of it. So like when the rich guy's wife decides that she's not going to honor her late husband's words, I don't think she even knows what she's doing. Like, I don't think she's even aware that this is the amount of damage that it is going to cause in another person's life. I don't think that even factors into somebody's thinking. That's not a villainous thought. That's just lack of empathy and indifference, right? So I wanted to sort of capture that, and that I thought would be unique treatment for this film, right? Which maybe other films have not done that. So that's the thinking behind that, basically.
Sure. I want to talk about Manu's character because I feel like it's very vulnerable, it's broken, and he embraces being broken. And I think that was really beautiful. But at the same time, it's one which could have easily been a psychopath. It could have been someone who is exceptionally ethically and morally challenged. I mean, don't get me wrong, he still stalks her from afar.
Yeah.
And that is still quite disturbing, in that sense. But उसके intentions गलत नहीं थे, वो एक destructive intention से नहीं stalk कर रहा था. But of course, stalking is still a bad thing and it's never condonable, right? I think for you to make sure you get that balance, and in order to not make it into a toxic character, what factors did you bear in mind for that?
Oh, it was very, very taxing because I was very scared of getting it wrong constantly. That is one thing that I was really worried about because I know like I said, it's not tangible the impact that a film can have, but you also are aware that I don't live in a bubble. I obviously know that it's a very powerful tool. An actor like Rakshit Shetty doing like stalking a girl can be taken out of context very easily.
Yeah.
So I was very scared of how that aspect of nuance is going to be misrepresented. So every step of the way, that was a constant sort of question mark that I had, which I was like, okay, is this too much? Are we doing too much? Are we sending out the wrong signal? Are we um, glorifying this aspect of his madness? Are we staying in that zone where, we are trying to humanize him and make people understand his madness? It's two different things. So to be very honest with you, until the day of the release, I didn't know what I had done with regard to getting it right, and I still feel it's a very debatable point. For some, it will feel what he did and what how we have portrayed him is very wrong, and for some it will feel like, okay, this is this has been done with a certain nuance, right? So I'm fully aware of the space in which the character exists, but I did tell myself one thing, that I'm not going to censor myself or sort of try and be politically correct. I'm going to go where the character is asking me to go. I'm going to go to uncomfortable places, so that is going to rustle a few feathers for sure. And I wanted to go and explore that, and that's what we've done. So I don't know how much of it I've gotten right, but the intention was always to be sensitive about it.
Hmm. It's interesting because I feel like, especially after Animals trailer released, I'm not sure if you've seen the trailer, but
Oh, yeah, I saw.
a lot of conversations have started again about glorification of toxic characters and hyper masculinity and all these things. But somewhere a part of me, I mean, I can understand where people are coming from when they say this. And obviously, it should never ever be condoned because normalizing such behavior in our, will be very detrimental to our society. But at the same time, it almost seems as though people are, like you said, are very afraid of embracing those uncomfortable truths because toxic people exist in our society. We have people who are very psychologically and emotionally damaged and can resort to such actions. Where do you sort of stand on this debate, actually? Because I think it would be very nice to get your perspective because I feel like your character could have easily become that.
No, I see. There is a certain. I am not for telling somebody that they shouldn't do something or this shouldn't be shown. Everything should be shown. Anything can be shown. I am of the opinion that there should not be any censorship in terms of how messaging, film filmmaking and storytelling is a device primarily for entertainment, right? The morality of it in terms of what message people take of it is not the filmmaker's job, right? How you respect women, how you respect people, how you respect one another is something that should start at home and at a very young age. A film can't do that for you. If if a film is changing your mindset, you're already way off the course. If a film is going to have that impact on you, so it's very, I'm not in favor of a certain sort of censoring of such depictions. But at the same time, having said that, there is a certain responsibility that a filmmaker internally should have, which is to each his own, right? Like Sandeep Reddy Vanga will have his own moral compass in terms of what works, what he thinks is okay, right? I'm sure he thinks that way. And going by his films, it is obvious because he there is a certain strong justification that exists within him, just like how it exists within me. There are things that we will get right, there are things that we'll get wrong, but I think it's good that such films get made and there's a discourse that happens at a later point of time,
Sure.
which will again educate people more about what is good and what is bad behavior, how you should behave towards one another. So in a way, it is adding fuel to the whole conversation. So I don't think that is a bad thing.
Sure. Now, I've not watched all your films. Apologies for that. I will need to definitely head straight into watching all your movies, which actually I should have really done as part of my research
So
material.
you just have to watch two films, Godi
Yeah,
Banna and Olugari.
I know. But what I have noticed though, and especially because you screenwrote Andhadhun as well, um, there seems to be this whole notion because again, I mean, it is no surprise why you and Sriram Raghavan really got on well visionary wise and as storytellers is because again, his films have this whole notion of an unassuming character being caught up in a bottleneck situation. And I think a lot of your films actually have that sense of main characters being caught up in that bottleneck situation, where it's almost spiraling in a very dangerous circumstance. Do you think because, you did say, like you mentioned about your experience of witnessing something so horrific in your life, do you think that's really had a huge impact in you maybe perhaps introspecting into these characters and building these characters as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's so the thing is when you watch something as horrific as somebody dying in front of you, it's not it's and you watched a lot of films and you've seen a lot of violence. You've seen a lot of I play a lot of video games, so I'm constantly killing characters on screen. But when it actually happens in front of you, it is not as disturbing as you think it should be, but it plays on your head, right? It does. Those visuals stay in your mind for a very long time. And so I don't. So again, I don't know exactly what is the influence, but I know for a fact that that image, if, like I can close my eyes, I can still see it, right? So it is disturbing to that sense, and I am a very I'd like to think I'm sensitive about generally about the world around me. So I'm moved by a lot of things that I read. I'm very sensitive by nature. Like I'm very easily affected when I see something. So I'm very sure that it is in some way subconsciously affected my the way I look at the world. So for sure, yeah, it's
It's quite interesting because this is a rare film which is a love story, but it's split between two parts. And I don't mean it as like a prequel and a sequel. I mean as in the same film, just divided into two. Like you've had the KGFs, you've had Pushpa, Bahubali, and these are like massive event films. Here is a very simple, humble film of yours, divided into two parts, which I think is quite revolutionary because we've never seen that before in Indian cinema. Do you think that I mean, why did you decide actually, first of all, to really divide it into two rather than making one singular film?
to be very honest, we started out wanting to make one singular film. That was the idea. But as I started shooting the first film, we came under the second wave lockdown in Bangalore, and which lasted for about 4 months. And I had a lot of time, and I'd already started shooting for the film. So my mind was already thinking of scenes and staging of scenes and how to go about it. So the story started growing in my head a lot more than it was on paper as a script. So once we finished the lockdown, when we started shooting, I immediately, like, very quickly got a sense that there are two stories here, like there are two films here, and it I wanted to shoot a lot more. So I am a producer myself, so I don't like shooting extra and
Mm.
then getting rid of the footage. So I had a conversation with Rakshit about it, and I told him that, listen, I have uh, this idea of making it into two parts. I want to shoot a lot of extra stuff. If the idea doesn't work, then we'll be losing a lot of extra stuff. We'll have a lot of extra scenes at our disposal. So, what do you think? So, Rakshit, being Rakshit, the sweetheart that he is, was we did the mathematics, and he was like, okay, you know what? Shoot what you want. We'll figure out later. So I went ahead and shot literally what I wanted. And then at the end of it, when I was editing the film, I called him and told him, listen, I saw the whole film. It cannot be one for sure, because there's a huge shift in the way the story is going. It's like two different films. The way we have treated it is different. So he immediately got on board, and that's how it became two films. So
Oh, wow.
it's the funny thing is, it's like very rarely do you get to put out a director's cut. This is the director's cut. That is the biggest, the best thing about this experience for me working with Rakshit is that very few filmmakers get final cut and get to put out their version, and I've gotten to do that with these two films. So I'm very happy.
Sure. No, it's wonderful, and I think unintentionally a revolution. So that's great. Um, I think, yeah, so I was just saying earlier, Kannada cinema is growing exponentially. It's so wonderful to see the sort of content that's coming out now. I watched another beautiful film, which I mentioned in my interview with Rakshit also this year, called Hadinelentu by Prithvi
Yeah.
Ponanu. Oh, what a film. I mean, it was exceptional. I think, I mean, what do you have to say about this growth that Kannada cinema is having? I think going forward, what sort of stories would you be keen on exploring?
I speaking of Hadnail and Do is it's a beautiful film, but unfortunately people here don't know about it. It's it's not it didn't it I don't know if it released theatrically. Even if it did, it didn't get too many people to come and watch it in the theaters. It's easily one of the best films of the year for me at least. And I worked with him, with Prithvi. Both of us were assistants with Kirish Kasarvali. So I know him from way back. So with regard to myself, in terms of what is in store, where Kannada cinema is going, I think it's very exciting times because we are getting to tell a lot of different kind of stories and explore what is very intrinsically our identity. And to be able to do that is a privilege, and I will be looking to do more of that, tell stories from where we came up, where we come from. And I'm very excited by like I for myself, I don't like repeating genres. My first film was a father son story. My second film was a noir thriller. Third and fourth were a love story. So I want to do all kinds of films because I've grown up watching all kinds of films. So I want to do like an out and out commercial film. I want to do like a family entertainer. I want to do a dance drama. Like I want to do all kinds. So I'll that is what I'll be looking to do.
Sure. Now I know hypothetically when we talk about remakes, I know sometimes it's very difficult because obviously if a film has been remade into another language, it has to really tailor to the target audience as well as not just copy and paste the original content, but also add its own creative flair to it. Uh, Hypothetically, I'm asking if Sapta Saagaradaache Ello was remade in Hindi or any other language, how would you feel about that?
No, there have already been inquiries made about making it in Hindi. Uh, from a very reputed filmmaker and production house. The only condition being that I direct it. So
Oh,
yeah, I am not. I don't. I'm somebody who's very. I'm a very instinctive filmmaker, and I have traveled with this film for about 2.5 years. So I certainly won't be able to direct it immediately for sure. So I don't know. I mean, I'm all for people. If previously also both my films were remade into multiple languages. Godibanna, the remake rights were picked up for all five languages. Kavaludari, the remake rights were picked up for all five languages. So they were made into films as well. I am very. I don't have a problem with people taking remake rights and making stories as long as it's like you said, it shouldn't be a copy paste. It should, there has to be some artistic input, or a certain, like, for example, we got Departed from Infernal Affairs, one
hmm.
of the greatest films ever made by Martin Scorsese. And he was able to take a very eastern idea and make it his own, right? As long as a filmmaker can do that and put his footprint and put his identity onto the story and subject matter, I think it will be interesting to see. So I would be very curious to see how somebody would remake this.
All right. Well, look, we've run out of time here, but it's been so wonderful to have you on filmishilmy.com. Honestly, it's been so fascinating to hear what goes behind the scenes of creating such a masterpiece of a film. I genuinely went for a late night show to watch Side B, and honestly, I could not s- keep my eyes off the screen, and it really stayed with me even after the credits rolled. And I think that's definitely very, telling in the sort of reactions you've been getting. And I think the film is doing fairly well at the box office as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
So it's great. It's wonderful to hear that, and I can't wait to see you back in
No,
action
it's
as a director.
it's very special. Your feedback was very, very special for me. because you were one of the first people to tell me that you have seen Side B and not seen Side A. And it was my, you can imagine, right? I'm putting two films out in a span of like 3 months, and I am constantly worried about the audience who is watching Side B without watching Side A. Like, how would their experience be? Because I that is not something that I had sort of accounted for. So when I heard that from you and you told me that you really enjoyed the film, I can't tell you how much relief I felt, because I was like, okay, it is still working for somebody who has not seen Side A. So that's a good enough, sort of feedback. So thank you for that.
No, but I mean, it just shows what a good product you have, because if a film can be taken well and has a completion of its own as a standalone film, then I think you've done your job well as a storyteller. So huge
Thank you,
congratulations.
thank you. It means a lot.
Oh.
I'll make sure to just spread that to the entire team.
Definitely. Well, look, thank you so much, Hemant. It was so wonderful, and can't wait to catch up with you super soon.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.